Dr. Crew, Representative Sprenger has a thought.
Thank you, Co-Chair. So, Rudy, on this chart that you have here, obviously the achievement gap's a problem. Frankly, all of those percentages are a problem, every single one of them.
That's exactly right.
So how, catching you maybe off guard here, how would we compare with other states? Because frankly, I think 78%, which is the best, is nowhere near good enough.
Right, right. Well, if you looked at this from the standpoint of national data, you would see that essentially we are on par with other states that are failing as well. I don't know how to say this, and I always wonder how to talk about this, and I don't want to sound pejorative. I'm not trying to suggest that there's something broken about us. I'm just simply saying that the cycle we're in, the means by which we produce literate students is a flawed cycle. It is a flawed process. Anything that produces something with this kind of variability, the outcomes are either here or they're there, as opposed to being more the bandwidth being a little bit more narrow. It is, in my judgment, humbly said, a flawed process. What we want to do is reduce that variability, and why so many of these other initiatives are aimed at reducing isolation is that we think that variability and isolation come together. That when you have people who essentially are struggling in schools, whether they be teachers or principals or children or parents or whomever it is, and they operate in isolation, that they typically end up continuing to do some of the same things that they've done in the past and coming up with the same results. We want to break that cycle. We want to break that cycle. That is the interminable and seemingly indomitable problem of poverty itself, is that we continue to essentially give people exactly what they had, ask them to do something very different with it, and then ultimately expect something different to come out at the outcome at the other end won't happen. So when I look at these numbers, I think that there is a need for the state to double down on the issue of literacy. And that's essentially what this initiative is. And it means that we have to get particular about now what specifically would we double down on, and that's later in the presentation. But it starts with understanding that you're so right, Representative Sprenger, 78% is not a very good number in a state like this, right? And for us to be thinking that number is okay would then give license to us to think that all the other things are sort of reasonably okay, or we can make up some gaps here and there and so forth. So incremental change here has never been in my mind about this. This has always been about how do you hoist this thing up on a major flat platform that is completely different from what we have been doing in the past, and you ask people in the system to lead it, using some of these resources as a way of being able to thread new needles and build new programs and create new opportunities. But you're so right. None of these numbers are acceptable. If you looked at this on a national scale, the 78% is sort of more what other nations, what other states are essentially trying to revolve around. Many more states are looking at this same dichotomy of 78 or 82 or 92% versus 30 or 40 or 20%, and so they've got that same schism, and we just simply can't. You can't have a system that you pay for that produces such wild outcomes like that. And so that's the dilemma. And then when you further look at this by what's wrong with the system internally, right? How do we produce this kind of outcome? It's because in many cases we have a system that puts kids through this spin, rinse, and wash cycle of are you or are you not smart, are you or are you not capable, all by a test number. And that just can't be the way that we define smart. Right? There are other domains of learning, other domains by which people know what they know and have come to know and can do what they can do, but it isn't by virtue, it's not going to be manifested on a test. So I'm simply suggesting that the more we start talking about third grade reading, the more we're going to start also looking at a whole series of other literacies, if you will, that have not to do with third grade reading, but are indirectly an outcome of being able to read, like occupational literacy, like the ability to have some civic literacy, some ability to work in a community and understand your meaning in a community, your personal literacy, how do you actually understand how to work with other people and so forth. All of those things emanate from people who are confident enough as readers that they begin to see themselves as having the chance to manipulate and own their own world. That's what we really would want for young people in this state, and it starts with them being able to be functional readers by third grade.